Thank you. Well, first of all, let me say how delighted I am to be here in Christchurch for the first time, and to say thank you for the tremendous amount of clothing and other things that you provided for Ukraine. It was very much appreciated. We've actually been able to send out 4 truckloads of aid in full, so I know that the folk there, if they knew that I was speaking here today, would say, please pass on to them our very real thanks for the help. So bless you for that. Now, before I go any further, I ought to declare that I'm nothing to do with Hope Now. I'm actually the founder of Hope Now. My wife and I started Hope Now around our kitchen table in 1985. We started from nothing, and we were a bit like Christopher Columbus, really. We didn't know where we were going, and when we got there, we didn't know how we'd arrived. And we did it all on borrowed money. But it's been quite a journey. And it's interesting that I've just finished a course of radiotherapy for cancer. And sometimes as I've been sitting there waiting my turn to get on the slab, I've had time to reflect and to give thanks to God for the years. Let me just share a little bit of my background first before I go on to Ukraine. I was born in 1941, and my father died when I was just a year old, and my mother was not able to cope with, there were now 5 of us, all very young. In fact, the youngest was my sister Doreen, who was only 5 days old when my father died. So I was brought up in Hollybrook Homes in Southampton, and there I stayed until I was 15. And I was one of those boys that was constantly in trouble. I didn't even have to go looking for it, but I would find it. I was recalling this morning when I was speaking at the big breakfast in Southampton to many of our more wayward folk, and we were talking about behavior, and I said, I can remember when my teacher said to me, Jacobson, why don't you behave yourself? And my answer was, I am, sir. Very badly. And I had a certain amount of pride in that. When I was 15, I joined the army. When I was 16, I was kicked out of the army. After serving the Queen for 9 months, I was an inveterate thief, basically. From the age of 8, when I broke into my first house, I would constantly be nicking things. I was in what could broadly be called the removal service. So having removed some post office savings books in Aldershot, I was asked to leave the army. So I was now homeless, and I have the distinction of being the only homeless person on the streets of Southampton back there in that day, because all the men used to go to the Salvation Army. I went there for one night, and I discovered that that was not the safest place for me to be. It was a lot safer to find, you remember, those of you who are old enough who knew Southampton, we used to have the lifeboats hanging on the Royal Pier. And my bed was in one of those lifeboats. So that was my home. When I was 18, I was caught once again for housebreaking, And as I had no fixed address, they gave me one. And I came to Winchester Prison. And it was in Winchester Prison that I read a Gideon Bible, and through that came to faith. And that was just an amazing event in my life, because it dramatically altered the whole course. I shudder to think what my life would have been like if I had not read that Bible. But it did make a profound change, and God arranged for me to have an amazing group of people that were there at the right time for my life. When I went to London, I was sentenced to spend a year in London, and stayed up there. And in the church, the minister became a very dear friend, and two members of the congregation took me into their home. Pretty risky thing to do, I have to say, but they were wonderful people who knew what good mentoring meant. And so I had that, and then at each stage in my development, I had some wonderful people who mentored me, and not least of all, when after I'd spent 4 years at Spurgeon's College studying for the Baptist ministry, I met and married my dear wife, Sue, of 47 years. And I would simply testify that I would not have been half, not even a half of the man that I became, had it not been for my wife. Just God's provision for 47 years of partnership. We were more than just husband and wife. We were partners in ministry. We never did anything other than work together until the last 5 years of her life, when sadly she got Alzheimer's, and it was my privilege to care for her until she died. Now, how did I get involved in Ukraine? Well, let me give you the progression. After Spurgeon's College, I served in pastoral ministry for 8 years. So I served in Wandsworth, and then in Godstone, so a bit like Sublime to the Core Blimey, or the other way round. And then I was invited to become the national director and then the European director for Evangelism Explosion. And that I was happy to serve for 11 years. In fact, that's how I came to be preaching at St. James's Church in Cape Town, because I taught the first group of people in South Africa, Evangelism Explosion. So then in 1985, it became clear that my time with Evangelism Explosion had come to an end. Sue and I had always felt that evangelism should tie in with care and service, that it's all very well to have the word, which I put my hand up and say I still believe is the most important thing, but if it isn't accompanied by active service, then we are simply a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And so my wife and I sat round the table in the kitchen, and we didn't even know why, but we decided that both of us together, because she worked for the organization as well, that we would put in our notice for a month ahead, not knowing where the next bean would come from. And we lived by faith. And that was the start of Hope Now. In the first years, I was still traveling as an evangelist, traveling around the world, but also working among the so-called New Age travelers. These are the people that lived in buses and vans and generally littered the countryside. But I was their pastor, and those were wonderful years, which took us to many of the festivals, including the Glastonbury Festival. In fact, on the last year that I served there, we had 300 on our team, 300 evangelists working the field. And it was at that stage that I was invited never to return again. The organizer said that I was too evangelistic and I didn't believe in the pagan agenda, to which, frankly, I'm guilty. But he said, please don't come back. And I wondered why that had happened until I think it was probably 3 months later. I was talking with the head of the Baptist Union, and he said, Vic, do you think you could go to Ukraine to just write a report on the strength of the church? This was immediately after independence, and they wanted to know more about the church in Ukraine. I went there to write the report. I did write the report, but I don't think anybody ever read it. However, that was what got me there. And on the very first Sunday that I preached in a place called Cherkasy, I was invited to have a meal with the deacons of the church. And the person sitting opposite me was a man called Anatoly Perepelitsa. And he said, could you share with us your testimony? And as soon as I shared that I had been in prison, he almost jumped out of his seat. He said, do you know, we have just started working in the local prison, which is 3,000 men in the prison. And they've told us that we can convert a room into a chapel. So I said, well, are you going to do that? He said, yes, as soon as we have the money. I said, how much do you need? He said, $500. I had exactly $500 in my back pocket. Before I left home, Sue said to me, Vic, take this with you. God will show you when to use it. And I didn't need the Archangel Gabriel to flutter down and tell me this is the occasion. So I gave him the $500. And then I was very surprised when later on I was invited to go back to Ukraine to open the chapel. And the very first service that we held there, practically every prisoner that was there became a Christian. And it was an amazing time of revival. Many of those men today are in ministry. We have so many from that first group who are now amazing servants of God in the middle of this wartime. And of course, I hear every day, there's not a day that passes that I don't get messages from Ukraine, and often it is from people like Pavel and Sasha and Anatoly, all sharing how God is at work. What did we do? Well, I guess the first thing we did was to build a church, can you believe this, in a former Soviet jail. a 500-seater church. And the governor of the prison came to me one day and he said, "What is it you share with these men?" He said, "These men are animals." And he said, "Last week, Sasha Mikhaida came to me and he said, 'Sir, you need Jesus in your life.'" He said, "What's that about?" So I said, "Well, I'd love to share with you, but not here in the middle of the exercise yard." So we arranged to meet in the sauna. And you do not enter a Ukrainian sauna with any clothes on. And here I was in this sauna, being whipped with birch branches and sharing the gospel. Just me, the governor, and my interpreter. He and his wife and 2 daughters became Christians, and I had the joy of baptizing him. And I didn't baptize the others. They were baptized by the local ministers, but I had the joy of baptizing Colonel Alexander Tarasenko, the governor. So I was very thankful for my education in Winchester, that I was working in the prison, and that here one of the key people who opened the door really for us to go into all of the prisons in the oblast that we worked in central Ukraine. Then I discovered that there were homeless children. And of course, having been homeless myself, I was very interested to know just how they lived. And I was frankly appalled when I discovered that there were children living in sewers, living in the cemetery. In fact, when I went to the cemetery to meet some of them, on the way out, one of these little chaps put his hand in mine and looked up at me as much as to say, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And I realized that we would have to do something. Well, I'd already opened a cottage home in Cape Town, so why not open a cottage home in Ukraine as well? And so that's what we did. And eventually, we rescued 88 children from homelessness in our various cottage homes. That's all for Jesus, okay? In fact, that little chap became my son. I have 2 Ukrainian sons. One of them is living with me right now with the family. I have 2 noisy grandsons who keep me on my toes. And I just look at what God was doing there with the work among our homeless children. But yes, and then we put more than 200 young people through university, because Christians under communism were not able to go to university. And so they were very often in very lowly paid jobs, though quite intelligent people. And so in the early days, their sons and daughters were not able to go to university. And so we set up a program of sponsorship to see these young people through university. Today, those young people are the leaders in the community. And when I look and see what God is doing, for instance, David Butte, have you heard that name? David Butte is a Southampton fellow. I took him to Ukraine when he was 18, a young student, and he's still there, 20 years later. He's married to a Ukrainian lass who used to be my interpreter, and he has his family there, and doing the most amazing work today. I mean, just outstanding work. He has started a Christian school. He has a Christian cafe. But also in our headquarters, we set up, well, at least he set up, some classes for IT. Out of that, there are now 5 IT companies in Cherkasy. The one that he set up has 160 employees, taking in work from all over the world. And that's only one of them. Andrei Osipov, for instance, who used to be on my team for 2 years, he has over 100 employees in his business. And so, starting from training in university and training people in IT, we now look and we see the leaders today are these young Christians. And, when you're old, there's nothing better than to sit back and watch your children, is there? And that's how I feel about many of these people that I have been privileged to mentor through the years. They are the ones who are doing the work today. I'm not able to go to Ukraine at the moment, but they are still there. And if I look around the world and I see the young men that I have mentored over these many years, to see a pastor in Amsterdam, to see Pollsmoor Prison in South Africa, 2 people that I have mentored are doing an amazing work in Pollsmoor Prison. And here in Ukraine, to see these that have come through our ministry, and today they are the very people that God is using. And there's a sense in which I am put into the background and am there still just to encourage, which I do, obviously, and I raise funds, and I bless them through those funds, or raise aid, as you've heard. And so, when I have the opportunity to reflect, which we're allowed to do as old men can dream dreams, okay? So, to reflect and to say, God has done an amazing work. Not because it's my life. That's nothing to do with it. It's because God has his plans that start way back. I mean, we could say an eternity back. For he knows us before we are even born. And somehow through that experience of life and through prison, through college, through ministry, God performs miracle after miracle after miracle. And all I can say is, what a great God. What a great God. And nobody has been more privileged in life than I have. I recognize that. I have, in a sense, lived a charmed life. I've done the things that I believe in. I've literally traveled the world. I've managed to preach the gospel in the most unusual situations of life, believe me. And still, at this age, God is not finished yet. Obviously, I don't know the future. I know what I've planned. I know that on Sunday morning at 6:20, I should be flying to Italy and spending a month in quiet reflection in a place that I love, and 22 degrees does sound good after this winter. And then I will come back, and I have no idea. Moses started ministry when he was 80, so maybe the Lord still has a plan and a purpose. But that leads me to this question. We all are the sum total of all the experience that we've had. You and me. Your experience is different to mine. But here's the question. Are you doing the thing that God has prepared you to do through your experience? That's a very good question to ask yourself, isn't it? Isn't that a good thing to pray about? And to say, Father, show me if I'm doing what you want me to do, and if not, help me. Help me just to know, so that I can live out these years that you've given in service. We are living right now in a very frightening world. I don't know if you feel the same as I do. You know, when I see my grandchildren at play, I wonder, what is the future? What is the future? But we are part of that future. So many bad things happening, but you know, God uses the weak and the foolish things of this world to confound the wise. He has a plan for each one of us. And if we're living according to that plan, then we are part of the hope. We are part of the faith. We are part of the love. That eternal triangle, that biblical triangle, we are in it. Are you? Any questions?
Are you still collecting clothes?
Sorry?
Are you still collecting clothes?
Yes, but unfortunately I can't do it at the moment. You've got a car, well, you can put it in my car, that's fine. But no, the truth of the matter is that because I'm going away for a month, and my daughters just forbade me from, going to have to forget that. It's my doctor calling. Excuse me, while I just quickly...
He's busy. That's a first for me. Brilliant. Can I ask you something? I've known you for years, and you're always the same. You've got this passion about it. But Ukraine, just give us some insight of what, maybe 3 things we can pray for the country right now. We get the news version. You have the on-the-ground version. What can we pray for about that nation?
Sure. Well, I would say, first of all, pray for the Christian church there, because this is the time for the Christian church. People have come to see that it's the Christians who are there to help. And I really believe that we are on the cusp of a revival in Ukraine. I have great hope for the gospel in Ukraine. Secondly, I would say pray for the leadership. We have been fortunate to have such an outstanding leader in President Zelensky. And thank God that he's been given the support. I do believe that he'll be able to certainly drive the Russians back. The Russians have performed appallingly, really, and the Ukrainians have done so well, but pray that they'll manage to finish the job to get their country back, because I believe that Ukraine and the eastern flank of Europe will play a significant part in the coming decades. So pray that that will happen. But I think also pray that those who are really fatigued, bear in mind, people like David Butte haven't had a day off since February 24, 2022. Literally, they are working all the time, and they're in a war situation where sirens are going regularly, daily. They're seeing missiles fly overhead. Praise God that Cherkasy, as the city, is the only major city that has not had a single missile strike. Though it's been aimed at, they've managed to knock them all out of the sky before they reach. And I believe God has put a dome of protection over that city, and pray that that city, which is really a city of refuge today, will maintain their service even though they are tremendously fatigued. It's a hard time for them. Hold them up in prayer.
Whereabouts in Ukraine is Cherkasy?
Cherkasy is 190 kilometers southeast of Kiev. If you follow the river Dnieper down until it becomes a lake, on the south shore of the lake is the city of Cherkasy, and Cherkasy is this major city of the oblast of Cherkasy. We've only worked in the oblast of Cherkasy, believing that God would have us concentrate our effort into one area so that we can have a major influence and create a model for other areas. Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more. Di, can I get the microphone?
Yes.
Oh, no, this is an important question. Mine's not a question, I'm just going to tell Vic from experiences. Right, okay. But I've never met you before. The church I used to go to in Enfield just used to pop the Hope Now newsletter into, I think it was something like our church magazine or something. Right, that explains it. Yeah, I mean, God just spoke to me through your ministry, and I was hoping you'd get to the bit about the students, because I remember you asking for sponsorship. We sponsored a lad as a family through that, and he was doing IT, as you said. And yeah, we lost touch for a few years, but we're still in touch via social media, which is quite nice. And I know he knows David Butte, obviously, because I've seen David Butte comment on the media as well. So yeah, I mean, it's just amazing work, really, and I don't know what else to say at this point, but it's just nice to hear your story again. Remind me of lots of things I used to read. I haven't really spoken to him much since the war broke out. He's actually in California, and I did ask the boy I sponsor, or man I sponsor, pardon? Alexander Sasha Yarmotolai. Yamalotti, yeah. You do, yeah, yeah. I don't know what he said he was helping friends, and we'd talk on social media, and I thought, perhaps not ask too many questions if he's helping people in Ukraine, because... I will, yeah. Okay.
Thanks, cheers. I think it's probably, you could stick around for a minute or two if anybody wants to ask you something. Yeah. I know you just said it's all for Jesus, and you're dead right, because you know that. But thank you, because what you've done and what you talked about today has been a positive inspiration, I know, to me, and I'm sure to everybody that's listened to you. Sorry, you're pointing at me, love. Oh, sorry, really? Did I? I'm sorry, I'm blind. Ask a question.
Yes. Is Trikashi a large enough place to appear on a world map?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, it will. Cherkassy. 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 It's very difficult for a dyslexic to spell.
You. Well, that's it. So now you know something about where the clothing ended up in that place, and all that Vic's done over the years. And I leave you with his question, really. How's this affected you and your place and your ministry, what you're doing? And so much of what I've heard today has just brought Ukraine back into my consciousness, certainly, and that we should be praying for that country that's so wretchedly torn apart by this ghastly war. And so I'm going to pray for you and pray for your great time in Lake Como, isn't it?
No, I'm going to Cherkassy. Sorry.
You're not?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
You're going to Italy?
I usually have a sleep after lunch, you see. So I've already gone. No, I'm going to Varazzi, which is, if you can imagine, the boot of Italy. You go to the top of the boot and turn left. Just about 8 miles along on the coast is a place called Varazzi, with the sea in front of me and the mountains behind me.
There we go. Let me pray for this guy, can I? And then we can talk a little bit more if you'd like to.